Hi everyone, my name's Deanna and I am obsessed with startups and the amazing things that go on behind the scenes to make them successful. I won't go into too much depth on myself because the point of this video is for you to gain an understanding of what a startup studio is, what the current market landscape looks like, and how experts will predict these entities will scale in the future. But just in case you're curious, I've put my LinkedIn below, feel free to check me out. And also a link to my blog is below, and if you're looking for a more detailed description on any of the things we talk about, you'll find that in the blog. So without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so the first thing you should know about startup studios is that they're also called venture builders. There's no difference between these terms. They're used completely interchangeably, and I like to call them venture builders, but to each their own. Later on, I'll define exactly how startup studios are different than startup accelerators, different than incubators, and even from venture capital firms. But for now, let's just stick to the basics. Venture builders are basically places where one team of people create startups. Once they prove that the business model is viable and they're getting some initial traction with the market, the internal team that created the startup within the venture builder, within the startup studio, hires an outside CEO and other founding members from their network of talented entrepreneurs to come take over the startup and grow it. So you might be thinking, why would anyone spend all the time to build a startup from scratch just to give it all away? There are two reasons for this. One, the internal team with the venture builder just wants to work on a new project. That's what we love to do. We love to build and think and experiment, and we don't necessarily want to be the CEO of a company and run it. Secondly, a venture builder keeps most of the equity from a startup. So even though they kind of give it away to a new team, the venture builder with the original team keeps most of the equity. And this is in line with the goal of startup studios and venture builders. It's to solve problems and make money. And the basic building blocks of a venture builder are financial capital, human capital, infrastructure, and ideas plus execution. A venture builder has to fund the beginning stages of the startup, which might be things like the cost of the domain name for the landing page, the cost of Google AdWords to get some marketing going, the cost of surveying the market. All of these things, these nominal expenses add up. And the venture builder pays for all of them. In addition to funding, the venture builder has to pay the people who work on the core venture building team. These people are like staff. They're not startup founders eating ramen noodles, hoping for a big break. They're brilliant people who are working really hard on the behalf of the venture builder to come up with the best startups and rapidly test their viability. So, in order to test these things out and make these things work, the internal team needs a place to set up shop. Office space plus other structural elements, including access to the network of talented engineers and qualified investors, are all included in the infrastructure piece of the startup studio model. Lastly, the founding team needs an idea to work on and operations in place to bring these startups to market. So the ultimate goal of a venture builder, the reason why they were even created in the first place, is to improve the speed at which startups are validated and brought to the market. They also have a goal of increasing the startup's chance of success by channeling the experience and resources of the venture builder. The venture builder has very different processes from one to the other, and we'll get back to that, but first, let's examine a brief history of where these venture builders and startup studios came from and how they've evolved over the years. The first venture builder was created in 1996. It was, and still is, called Idea Lab. And it was founded by Bill Gross, who is an icon for so many reasons. In London, around that same time, another venture builder was planting roots and sprouting up. Blenheim Chalka is a well-known and respected venture builder with deep roots in this new model ecosystem. Once these two entities launched, it would be almost a decade before another would follow. But in 2007, two new venture builders burst onto the scene, BetaWorks and Rocket Internet. This is where we start to see the business model getting interesting. So before BetaWorks and Rocket Internet came on the scene, there was essentially only one way to get ideas and startups out of a venture builder. You had to source the ideas from the internal team. And because the ideas all came from the internal team, there had to be a really high level of internal team support. But when BetaWorks and Rocket Internet arrived on the scene in 2007, entrepreneurs found that they had options. These new venture builder models opened the door to outside founders, so any entrepreneur could bring their idea into the venture builder, and if the venture builder team liked the idea, they would act as sort of a co-founder to the entrepreneur who came up with the idea.
Venture builder teams work with the external founders to develop their idea and create a startup. But there are trade-offs. The higher the level of support from the venture builder team, the more equity they're going to want. Conversely, if the venture builder team is super hands-off, they don't require as much equity, but they also don't help out as much. What you start to see here is that if a company comes into a venture builder with an external idea and the venture builder team is pretty hands-off, this becomes almost the exact model for a startup accelerator. And an accelerator is a different entity altogether. It has different goals, and so venture builders tend to, try to get away from those and be pretty hands-on regardless of whether the idea is internally sourced or externally sourced, because if they don't, basically, they're just an accelerator. Nearly a decade since BetaWorks and Rocket Internet launched, a new wave of startup studios emerged. Venture builders like eFounder, Science Inc., Atomic, and Prehype all launched between 2011 and 2012. Each of them iterated on the studio business model slightly and opened up in different markets, accelerating the growth of venture builders and establishing it as an industry. Huge names began to move onto the scene in 2015. The brands behind some of the world's current unicorn companies like Dollar Shave Club, Hims, and Tumblr have come out of startup studios that launched less than 5 years ago.
So why the sudden boom? Well, it's simple. Investors began getting seriously interested in startups and were pouring millions of dollars into startups, and some of them were using other people's money to do it. So these funds had to find a way to make startups less risky if they wanted to keep investing in them. And as it turns out, the venture builder model does exactly that. On the next episode of Studio Upstart, we're going to take a look at exactly what makes up the startup studio business model. There are 6 key elements that can be mixed and mastered in different ways to create an unlimited variety of incredibly cool venture builders. So I will catch you next Sunday for another episode of Studio Upstart. My name is Deanna. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you learned something today. Thanks so much for watching.